I'm Clara Evans, 29, the daughter they trained to clap quietly while Madison took every bow. Tonight, their golden girl made me her clown. In my family, Madison's spotlight has always burned two bright birthdays, recitals, even my grief. Evelyn polished her crown while I stitched silence into my days. But last night, in a ballroom filled with sequins and phones, Madison staged my humiliation for the world. One stumble, one fall, and suddenly, I was the viral joke. Ever been erased in your own house, turned into entertainment? Hit like if someone ever laughed while you bled. Comment if you've been told your pain was just fun. It began with stilettos handed to me, silver and sharp, while Madison's smirk dared me to try. I felt the floor sway beneath me, as though the marble itself had betrayed me. The chandelier lights scattered across sequined gowns and crisp tuxedos, each glittering shard of light bouncing off the phones already aimed in my direction. I had been here before. In a sense, not in a ballroom filled with guests clutching cocktails and smirking, but in every birthday, every holiday, every dinner where Madison shone and I filled the space beside her. I was always the support beam she leaned on, the one to clap when she demanded applause, the one to clean up when her sparkle dulled. Never the star. Tonight, though, she wanted more than her usual spotlight. Tonight, she wanted my humiliation to be the centerpiece. It started innocently enough, or at least that's how she staged it. Clara, come on, do it. Everyone's trying the stiletto challenge. Her voice dripped with sugar, loud enough to draw a circle of expectant eyes. The bridesmaids giggled as if rehearsed, glasses lifted halfway to their lips. I looked at the shoes she held out, gleaming silver stilettos, too narrow, too tall, a predator's grin in footwear form. For a moment, I hesitated. I had no need to prove myself here, but then came Evelyn's soft push, her motherly murmur that still knew how to cut. Don't make a scene, Clara. Your sister just wants a laugh. I slipped my feet into the shoes. The straps hugged my ankles too tightly. The heels felt uneven, shaky, as though they resented my weight. A tremor ran up my spine. The music pulsed from the speakers, some upbeat track chosen for 20-somethings more interested in spectacle than sincerity. I took a step. Another. My ankle wobbled. The heel trembled beneath me. Then, a sudden shift to tilt I couldn't control. My foot slid. My balance snapped, and I crashed down hard onto the polished floor. Pain shot through my ankle, sharp and electric. The crowd erupted, not in concern, but in wild delight. Phones tilted closer, recording every angle of my fall. Epic fail, sis! Madison's voice sliced through the laughter. She clutched her own stomach, fake tears of amusement rolling as her friends leaned against each other, shrieking. I lay there, heat rushing to my face, the sting of humiliation far outweighing the ache in my twisted ankle. A bridesmaid, Jenna, always eager to please Madison, lifted her phone high and hit post before I could scramble to my knees. "This is gold," she snickered. The guests laughed harder, a wave rolling over me, drowning out the music. I pulled myself upright, my ankle screaming with each ounce of pressure, but no one extended a hand. No one thought to ask if I was hurt. To them, pain was secondary. Entertainment was the priority. I caught her then, Madison's face. Not the mask of shock she put on for others, but the truth written in the small curl of her lip, the sparkle of satisfaction in her eyes. She had done something to those shoes. A smear of glue, a loosened screw, some trick to guarantee my fall. And she had staged it perfectly, so I would be her clown before the weekend even began. My stomach clenched, not from pain, but from the unmistakable sting of betrayal. I stood there, shoulders squared though my body screamed otherwise. I wanted to call her out, shout her name across the ballroom, but the words stuck in my throat. Not here, not now. The cameras were still on me. The hashtags were already being written. I knew it. My phone buzzed against my palm. I glanced down. The video, my fall, my shame was already online. Thousands of views. Thousands of strangers laughing with her. And Madison, only a few feet away, still smirking as though the world itself was her audience. Her phone buzzes, the video already has thousands of views. In the Evans household, light always belongs to Madison. I was just the shadow. That sentence wasn't an exaggeration. It was the very architecture of my childhood, the way the house seemed wired. Spotlights tilted toward Madison, corners left for me. Even now, standing in the wreckage of last night's humiliation, I couldn't untangle the memory of my sister's smirk from the thousands of echoes before it. It was as if every mocking laugh had a root, and every route led back to our family home with its white siding and rose bushes Evelyn tended with religious zeal. The clearest memory? My 18th birthday. Most girls imagine balloons, friends, maybe a cake glowing with 18 flames. Mine was scheduled the same night as Madison's recital, of course it was. Evelyn had insisted. Your sister's performance is important, Clara. You'll understand. I did understand, in the way a shadow understands light. I had no choice but to bend around it. We rushed through a tiny dinner. No one asked what gift I wanted. No friends came over. Evelyn baked a cake, yes, but left it cooling on the counter while she ironed Madison's sequined costume and fussed with her curls. I stood in the kitchen, the house humming with preparation, my cake wilting. My father would have noticed. He always remembered the details, always tugged me into the light with a quiet joke or a conspiratorial wink. But by then he was gone. I had buried him months earlier, along with the only balance in that house. His chair at the table sat empty, his silence stretching longer than Evelyn's chatter. Without him, the scales tipped fully, permanently. Madison became the prodigy. I became the caretaker. I remember trying once, tentatively, to ask Evelyn if we could at least light the candles before we left for the auditorium. She sighed, exasperated. Clara, don't be so sensitive. We'll celebrate later. Your sister has worked so hard. It was the same refrain I had heard for years. Sensitive, demanding, never grateful enough. I swallowed my protest, because what good did it do to speak when the script was already written? Later that night, after we returned from the recital, Madison showered in flowers, praise spilling from Evelyn like champagne, I slipped into the kitchen. The cake still sat there, slightly sunken, frosting cracked. I pressed in the candles myself, the wax wobbling against the soft sponge. No one sang, no one clapped. I leaned over the cake, whispered my wish into the empty air, and blew out the flames alone. The smoke curled upward, the only witness to a birthday no one remembered. That moment branded itself into me. The quiet extinguishing of my own celebration. The acceptance that Madison's brilliance would always devour my milestones. Every graduation, every minor success, all eclipsed by the next performance, the next prize, the next glimmer of her charm. After Father's death, the roles crystallized. Evelyn became Madison's stage manager. I became the backstage crew, cooking when Evelyn forgot, ironing uniforms, paying bills once I was old enough. Not out of choice, but necessity. I learned to stitch silence into my daily life, to hold steady so Madison's spotlight wouldn't wobble. If I longed for recognition, I buried it, deep and quiet, where even I could barely hear it. And so it makes sense, doesn't it, that when Madison handed me those silver stilettos at the party, Evelyn didn't blink? That she laughed with the crowd instead of rushing to me? They were only replaying the family script. Clara falls, Madison shines. Clara bleeds, Madison beams. I shook off the memory and returned to the present, to the phone buzzing in my hand. A notification popped open, cruel in its simplicity. Madison had shared the viral clip in her bridesmaids group chat, lacing it with strings of laughing emojis. My stumble, my pain, my humiliation packaged neatly as entertainment, circulated like candy among her inner circle. And I realized with a cold certainty, nothing had changed since that dark kitchen on my 18th birthday. I was still blowing out the candles alone. Shame used last minute. Online, it lasts forever. The words echoed in my head as the blue glow of my phone lit up the hotel room. The dim lamp on the nightstand gave off a sickly yellow hue, barely pushing against the shadows, but it was enough to see the endless stream of notifications climbing up the screen like ivy. Every buzz was a dagger, a new comment, a new share, another reminder that my stumble in those sabotaged heels had escaped the ballroom and now belonged to the world. I scrolled, each swipe sinking me deeper. Someone had looped my fall into a meme. Gravity always wins. Another slowed the clip, zooming in on the moment my ankle twisted, complete with cartoon sound effects. Hashtags multiplied: number epic fail, number bridezilla sister, number stiletto down. Thousands of strangers laughed, their cruelty casual, thoughtless, but devastating. In the bridesmaids group chat, Madison had already set the tone. Strings of laughing emojis, gifs of clowns tripping, a short, "Lol, Clara, you killed it," that dripped with venom disguised as banter. Evelyn's message appeared beneath it, motherly yet cold. "Don't be dramatic, Clara. It was just a bit of fun." A defense, but not of me, of Madison, always Madison. I stared at it until the words blurred. A faint vibration signaled a new text. This one was private, from Grace, one of the bridesmaids. Are you okay? She had written. I stared at her words, the first sliver of human concern I'd seen all night, but even that felt fragile, hesitant, as if she were afraid Madison might notice. I typed back, I'll survive, then deleted it. What was the point of pretending? I left the message unanswered, letting silence do the talking. The phone buzzed again, cruelly insistent. I tossed it aside and reached for the leather-bound journal I always carried, its pages filled with fragments of thoughts, lesson plans, and prayers I never spoke aloud. Tonight, I opened it to a blank page and began writing not poetry, not teaching notes, but a list. Sacrifices. Madison's recitals I had ironed costumes for. Bills I had paid when Evelyn forgot. Nights I had studied in silence while Madison practiced in the living room. Birthdays I had swallowed without celebration. The list grew long, ink carving out the ledger of my life as if I were building a case. For a moment, I thought of my classroom back home, where I once taught Maya Angelou's Still I Rise. I had read it aloud, strong and steady, trying to press confidence into my shy students. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. How proud I had been to explain resilience, dignity, the refusal to be diminished. Tonight, though, the irony cut deep. Here I was, flattened into a punchline, too weak to rise from the ashes of my own humiliation. Scrolling aimlessly again, my thumb caught on a name I hadn't expected, Harper Lee. Not the author, the model. My former student, once a quiet girl who hid in the back row, terrified of speaking aloud. She had posted a quote in bold lettering against a black background. The fire you walk through becomes the fuel that lifts you. My chest tightened. Harper Lee, the girl I had once coaxed into reading a single line of poetry aloud, was now a famous face with millions of followers, offering courage to strangers. Did she even remember me? Probably not. To her, I was just another shadow in the past. Still, the words lodged in me. I read them again, and something shifted. The shame that had blistered all day began to cool, hardening into something denser, darker. My humiliation wasn't fading, it was crystallizing. The laughter of strangers, the betrayal of my own blood, the silence of my mother, all of it was forging me into something else. Determination. Not the kind that smiled politely and endured, but the kind that waited, watched, and struck when the moment was right. The phone buzzed, once more. I picked it up with hands that no longer trembled, half expecting another meme. Instead, it was a private message from Madison herself. The words glowed like acid on the screen. Thanks for the content, Cispio. My fingers clenched around the phone, and I knew this wasn't the end of my humiliation. It was the beginning of something Madison couldn't imagine. The gown sparkled, the bride didn't. Saturday morning bled into chaos inside the bridal suite. Curling irons hissed, perfume clung heavy in the air, and the carpet had disappeared under a flood of makeup kits, lace, and half-empty champagne flutes. Assistants darted like bees trying to stitch perfection into the day, but the queen bee herself stood fuming in the center, her fists clenched into the glittering folds of her gown. Madison. Her voice sliced through the room. This seam is uneven. Do you all see this? I look like trash. She wasn't pointing at the seamstress or the bridesmaids, though her glare landed squarely on me. Clara, what did you do? The accusation stung, though I hadn't touched the dress. I opened my mouth, but Evelyn swooped in like she always had, smoothing her daughter's jagged edges with saccharine excuses. She's just stressed, Clara. Don't make it worse. My mother's words pressed me back into silence, the same script she had recited since childhood. Madison unraveled, and I was told to hold the pieces, no matter how sharp they cut. Grace, standing near the vanity, caught my eye. Her sympathetic wince was subtle, almost invisible against the rush of hairspray clouds. She didn't speak, she never did in front of Madison, but her silence was kind, at least. I bent to pick up a fallen veil when I noticed Madison's handbag half open, slouched on the chaise lounge. A small orange bottle of pills peeked out, label smudged, cap not fully twisted shut. For a second, my pulse froze. I had seen similar bottles before, tucked away in her bathroom, hidden under scarves and drawers. Old memories pricked, covering for her dizziness at family dinners, excusing her moods as migraines. I had always held her secrets, the quiet guardian of her curated perfection. As Madison screeched at the hairstylist, "Not so tight, do you want me bald?" I heard her mutter low, almost to herself, "Just don't let them see me crack." The words were ragged, not meant for anyone's ears. I froze, realizing how fragile her pedestal truly was. The flawless bride was nothing but a porcelain shell, already spider-webbed with fractures. The room spun around us, chatter and laughter from the bridesmaids coating over the tension like frosting too sweet to swallow. I tried to focus on breathing, but my gaze drifted toward Madison's phone left buzzing on the counter. Another notification flashed across the screen before it dimmed. I leaned slightly, heart pounding, and caught it. A text from Derek. "Remind me why we're doing this circus?" The sight knocked the air from me. Her fiancé, the man everyone thought adored her. His words carried exhaustion, doubt, maybe even disdain. My stomach turned. If Madison was crumbling, Derek was crumbling too. And somehow, the fragile scaffolding of their perfect wedding, their shining facade, had deposited their secrets squarely into my hands. The realization hit like ice water. I wasn't just holding my own humiliation anymore. I held theirs too. He called me by her name and didn't even bother to correct himself. The hotel corridor smelled of stale whiskey and expensive carpet cleaner. It was late, long past midnight, when I stepped out of my room in search of air that wasn't soaked in perfume and regret. The hallway was hushed, lights dimmed to a honeyed glow, but then I saw him, Derek, slouched against the wallpaper like it was the only thing holding him up. His tie was half undone, his shirt buttons mismatched, and in his hand a glass with nothing left but melted ice. "Madison," he drawled, smirking at me as if the world revolved around the curve of his lips. For a second I thought maybe he was too drunk to focus. But he didn't blink, didn't blush, didn't even flinch. He just let the word hang there, dangling between us, deliberate as a knife. It wasn't a slip. It was ownership. He was testing how far his arrogance could stretch. I swallowed hard, tasting bile and humiliation. A hotel staff member passed by, pushing a trolley stacked with fresh linens, glancing at us before hurrying away. Witnesses were everywhere, it seemed, but none who would ever speak. "Wrong, sister," I said quietly, though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. He only chuckled, dragging a hand through his dark, sweaty hair. "Does it matter?" The words tumbled from his lips, reeking of scotch and entitlement. I turned sharply, retreating before his smirk carved deeper into me. But the echo of it followed me all the way back to my room. Once inside, I locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and felt the fury simmer into something sharper. If Madison had rigged the stiletto challenge to humiliate me, and Derek paraded his infidelity without shame, then maybe the universe had finally delivered me their weakness in return. I opened my laptop, pulse drumming. An old, dormant account, weighted one I had created back in college, long forgotten by everyone except me. No connections, no followers, no reason for anyone to suspect it belonged to Clara Evans. Perfect cover. Derek's social media was pristine on the surface. Filtered gym selfies, curated shots with Madison, hollow captions about forever. But then I clicked deeper, past the gloss, into the tagged stories. One account in particular was set to private. A blonde influencer with thousands of followers and a string of coy emojis as her bio. Her posts disappeared quickly, but the trail was there, faint, sloppy. A blurred reflection of Derek's watch in a mirror selfie. A hotel bar background that matched tonight's. I took screenshots feverishly, the sound of keys clicking like small victories. Each image a weapon, each timestamp a nail in the coffin of their perfect love story. I didn't need the whole picture, just enough to draw blood. The screen glowed back at me, proof captured in digital ink. My humiliation was still raw, still pulsing, but this evidence tasted like steel in my mouth, bitter and empowering all at once. My reflection stared back from the black laptop screen when it dimmed, hair disheveled, eyes wide and burning. For the first time in years, I wasn't just the shadow. I had leverage. "If they set me up with those heels," I whispered into the quiet, my voice trembling into resolve, "I'll set them up with this." I wrote down every scar, not to forget, but to prove I had lived through them. The hotel room was still cloaked in gray when I opened my eyes. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but faint noises seeped through the walls. A drunken laugh outside, the muffled beat of bass from somewhere down the hall, the shuffle of heels heading back to rooms. I sat up slowly. The sheets twisted around me like a cocoon I didn't ask for. My body ached. My ankle still tender from the staged humiliation Madison had orchestrated, but the heavier weight pressed inside my chest. On the nightstand lay the diary I'd carried for years, its leather spine softened from restless hands. I reached for it with something close to reverence. This wasn't a book of girlish doodles or secret crushes. It was my ledger, the private record of every invisible sacrifice that tethered me to Madison like a chain. I flipped through the pages, and ghosts rose up with every line. The year I covered her rent after she'd blown her paycheck on designer handbags, while Evelyn praised her ambition. The semester I sat up all night, editing her papers so she wouldn't fail her classes, only to watch her collect the dean's compliments as if she had earned them herself. The weekend I drove 3 hours to pick her up from a party gone wrong, bringing her home while Evelyn whispered to me, "Don't tell your father. It would break his heart." Then came the darker entries, the ones about scandals swept under our family's immaculate rug. A pill bottle flushed, an affair tucked behind an alibi, a debt paid quietly. My pen had carved all of it into the paper, proof that my life had been spent mopping up her chaos, proof that Evelyn never once chose me, the dutiful daughter who held everything together. Reading it now, the shame that had clung to me for so long shifted. It wasn't humiliation anymore. It was testimony. I hadn't been weak. I hadn't been pathetic. I had endured, survived, documented. Each scar on those pages was evidence of a life lived in the margins, yes, but lived nonetheless. I picked up the pen lying across the last blank page. My hand trembled, not with fear but with something sharper. The ink bled out in steady strokes. Walk her down the aisle, my choice, not her gift. The words glared back at me. This wedding wasn't her charity, wasn't Evelyn's order, wasn't some stage where I played the supporting role. If I walked her down that aisle, it would be because I decided to. No more invisible sister, no more shadow. I closed the diary with a snap that felt final, a seal pressed over years of silence. In that sound, I heard my resolve click into place. The room remained hushed, but a sudden light blinked across the desk. My phone buzzed, skittering against the wood. I leaned forward, pulse rising, and the screen lit up with the notification that twisted my stomach into a knot. Madison had just reposted the fall video, the one where my humiliation was broadcast to strangers, and she had added laughing emojis. The glow of the screen burned in the dark, and I knew she wasn't finished with me. But neither was I finished with her. They saw a flawless bride. I saw a trembling girl behind the veil. The bridal suite was chaos wrapped in lace and perfume. Curling irons hissed, hairspray fogged the air, and laughter rose and fell in nervous bursts as bridesmaids balanced champagne flutes against the counter. The white gown, heavy with beads and stitched illusions, gleamed like armor on its mannequin. To the others, Madison was the centerpiece of a fairy tale. To me, she was something else entirely. Brittle glass wrapped in satin, just waiting for the wrong touch to shatter. Madison's voice cracked through the room like a whip. "Are you blind? The hem is uneven." She snapped at the seamstress crouched at her feet, yanking the fabric upward so hard a few beads scattered to the floor. The poor woman stammered an apology, fumbling with pins, while the bridesmaids exchanged anxious glances. I moved closer, instinctively, to steady the gown, but Madison's eyes flicked to me with venom. "Don't touch it, Clara. You've done enough." The words sliced through me, and a chorus of uncomfortable silence followed. Evelyn swooped in, smoothing the moment with that honeyed tone she always reserved for her younger daughter. "She's just stressed, Clara. Don't upset her further." It was the same refrain I'd heard my whole life. Madison erupts, Evelyn excuses. The world rearranges itself so my sister could stay immaculate, untouchable. But my gaze caught something no one else noticed. Madison's hand slipped beneath the dressing table, where a sleek clutch lay open. For the briefest moment, a familiar orange prescription bottle flashed in her palm. She tipped it back, swallowing dry, before snapping the bag shut again. My chest tightened. The same pills I'd hidden years ago, the same secrets I'd buried to protect her from scandal. "Don't let them see me crack," Madison muttered under her breath, low enough that only I could hear. Her reflection stared back from the mirror, hair sculpted to perfection, eyes rimmed in gold shadow, lips painted a daring red. To everyone else, she glowed. To me, she flickered. Grace, the quiet bridesmaid who had always shown me small kindnesses, touched my arm lightly. "Ignore her," she whispered, offering me a sympathetic smile before turning back to fix a ribbon on the bouquet. It was a fleeting gesture, but it reminded me I wasn't completely alone in this theater. Then I saw it. On the counter, Madison's phone buzzed with a message, screen lighting up with Derek's name. The preview of his text froze me where I stood. "Remind me why we're doing this circus." A cold weight pressed against my ribs. so even he felt the rot. Even he questioned the facade. I looked at Madison again, the flawless bride, the darling Evelyn defended at all costs. Her laughter rang false, her movements sharp and frantic. The mask glittered, but I could see the cracks widening underneath. And in that moment, standing in a haze of perfume and lies, I realized something brutal. This marriage wasn't just doomed to fail, it was rotten before it even began. They laughed, toasted, and filmed, never realizing they were dancing on my bruises. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, every corner alive with chatter and clinking glasses. A jazz quartet filled the air with honeyed notes, and waiters weaved through the crowd, balancing silver trays heavy with champagne. It should have been elegant, a celebration dressed in gold and silk, but all I could feel was the weight of every phone camera aimed, not at the bride, but at me. Clips of my fall played over and over, glowing on tiny screens, laughter swelling each time my body hit the floor in looping humiliation. Some guests nudged each other, tilting their phones so companions could watch. Others tried to hide their smirks behind raised glasses, though the cruelty in their eyes was naked. I stood near the edge of the reception, a half-empty flute sweating in my hand, forcing my lips into a brittle smile. Inside, a storm churned. The same poem I once read aloud to my students, Still I Rise, pulsed through me with biting irony. I had preached resilience, dignity, rising above mockery, and yet here I was, the punchline served on repeat. Madison glided through the room, the practiced star, her dress a river of satin. Guests orbited her like moths, their admiration loud and shallow. She let them adore her, while the shadow of her smirk lingered just long enough to remind me she was savoring my disgrace. Evelyn stayed close to her side, her posture regal, eyes sharp as she caught whispers. She frowned when people mentioned the video, but not because of me. Her worry was always about Madison's reputation, never mine. I caught Grace's gaze across the room. She offered me a sympathetic tilt of her head, but she didn't move closer. Too dangerous, maybe. To stand with me meant stepping into the ridicule herself. A pair of guests brushed past, their perfume and laughter trailing behind them like smoke. One of them paused, turning with a condescending smile. "You're Madison's sister?" For a second, I thought you were the help. The group around him erupted with polite, cruel laughter, their champagne bubbling over rims. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. Every cell in my body screamed to strike back, to claw their smug faces into silence. But I swallowed it, pressing my teeth together until my jaw ached. The glass in my hand trembled, tiny ripples disturbing the champagne's surface. I forced a smile, weak but intact, and murmured something neutral before stepping away, spine stiff. Inside, though, something shifted. The shame was no longer consuming me. It was sharpening into anger. Anger with an edge as clean as glass. Tomorrow, I whispered to myself, tomorrow they'll see me differently. When the screen lit up, I knew I held the noose in my hands. The hotel corridor smelled faintly of polish and whiskey, the carpets muffling footsteps as guests drifted back to their rooms. My pulse raced when I spotted Derek's phone abandoned on a side table, its screen glowing faintly with a notification. He had ducked into the men's room only moments earlier, careless in his drunken swagger, and left the device behind. For a long second, I stared at it, the war inside me pulling taut. Crossing that line meant stepping into a darker game, but hadn't they already dragged me there? I snatched it up, fingers trembling but precise, muscle memory guiding me as if I'd rehearsed this moment for years. I angled myself toward the corner, screen shielded by my hand. My old secondary account, long dormant, still held enough tricks to slip past locked profiles. One swipe, one guess, at a simple passcode, Madison's birthday. Of course. The screen opened as if it had been waiting for me. Messages exploded across the display, a stream of heart emojis, kisses, and photographs too intimate to mistake for anything but what they were. A blonde influencer, Blondie, as his contact so charmingly saved her, leaned across Derek's chest in one shot, his hand resting on her thigh, both of them laughing as if they owned the night. The timestamps were recent, very recent, so while Madison crafted her perfect image, her groom had been busy rehearsing for another stage. My chest constricted, anger battling with a bitter kind of vindication. Derek's slip of calling me Madison now twisted into cruel clarity. In his foggy, indulgent mind, the two of us blurred because his heart wasn't tethered to either. He had always been elsewhere. I snapped screenshots quickly, fingers moving with mechanical precision. Each capture was a weapon, each pixel another layer of proof. The phone buzzed again in my hand. A new message lighting up the screen, Blondie writing, "Counting down the hours till you're mine again, Captu." The door at the end of the hall creaked. I nearly dropped the phone as one of the bridesmaids appeared, strolling casually toward me with a half-empty champagne glass. My body went rigid. If she saw me like this, the game would end before it began. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice sweet but tinged with curiosity. I plastered on a smile so bright it hurt. "Just checking if this belonged to one of you. Found it lying here." I held the phone up casually, screen dark again, my thumb hovering in practiced ease. She nodded, too tipsy to press, and disappeared into another room. Only when the latch clicked behind her did I exhale, my body quivering with the rush of almost being caught. Back in my room, I laid the phone down on the dresser beside the stilettos, the same pair that had been rigged to humiliate me. My gaze shifted between the shoes and the glowing screenshots saved on my device. One weapon had been used to break me. The other, I whispered to the empty room, I would use to stand. Cameras flashed. A supermodel had entered the ballroom. The chandeliers above rained golden light down on sequined gowns and polished tuxedos, but the moment Harper Lee appeared in the doorway, all of it dimmed. A current of whispers surged through the rehearsal dinner as though a storm had just blown through. Guests craned their necks, champagne flutes frozen midair, while phones tilted upward in trembling hands. Madison's smile widened instantly, gleaming like the diamonds on her neckline. She had teased the arrival of a celebrity, but now she basked in the validation of being believed. To her, Harper wasn't a guest, she was another jewel to pin onto her perfection. "Ladies and gentlemen," Madison announced, her voice straining with a breathless pride, "please welcome my dear friend, and our very special guest, the incomparable Harper Lee." She paused dramatically as though she herself had orchestrated the applause that followed. Derek smirked by her side, his hand resting lazily against his glass, but his eyes were glazed, half-interested, as if this spectacle were one more mask in a play he didn't want to attend. I stood toward the back, tucked into the shadow of a marble pillar, hoping the dim light would hide me. My humiliation still clung to me like a second skin. The video of my fall had already become the unspoken theme of the weekend. Tonight, I wanted to shrink. But then Harper's gaze cut across the room, skipping past Madison's desperate radiance and falling squarely on me. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd imagined it. Yet she moved with deliberate grace through the cluster of admirers, every step measured, every angle precise, as though even the air obeyed her presence. When she reached me, her perfume, light and citrus sharp, carried memories I had not expected. She leaned close, ignoring the flashing cameras behind her, and whispered words only I could hear. "Miss Evans, you taught me how to walk tall." The din of the ballroom collapsed into silence in my mind. My throat closed. Harper Lee, the woman who graced runways from Milan to New York, who commanded entire billboards, had once been the timid girl who lingered after class, knees shaking in debate practice, too afraid to look an audience in the eye. And now, in front of Madison's curated kingdom, she named me. My lips parted, but no sound came out. Harper's hand brushed mine lightly, grounding me before she withdrew with a smile so calm it seemed to bend the room's energy. "Tomorrow," she whispered again, "I'll stand with you." The words slid into me like light through a crack in heavy curtains. I felt the tightness in my chest loosen, a fraction at a time. Someone still remembered me not as Madison's shadow, not as the sister to be mocked, but as a teacher, a guide, someone who mattered. Madison descended on us seconds later, voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Harper, darling, you found my sister. Don't mind her. She's just background." She looped her arm through Harper's, tugging her toward the front where photographers waited. "Let's get a proper photo. No need to clutter the shot." I forced a smile, stepping back as Evelyn shot me a warning glance, as if to say, "Don't ruin this for her." But Harper tilted her head at me before she let Madison pull her away. The look was unmistakable, a secret acknowledgement, a validation that bypassed every cruel laugh and every video meme. And when Madison raised her glass to toast her own brilliance, I caught Harper's eyes across the room. The faint, knowing smile she offered wasn't just comfort. It was a promise. Every step in those stilettos was a rebellion, and the ballroom held its breath. The cathedral hall glowed with 1,000 white blooms, lilies and roses twined around golden arches, the air thick with perfume. A string quartet played in the corner, notes curling high into the vaulted ceiling, as if the music itself prayed for the spectacle below. Guests rose from their seats, heads turning, voices dropping to murmurs that laced the air with expectation, cameras discreetly lifted, ready to immortalize the perfect moment. But tonight, the perfection wasn't Madison's alone. The shoes bit into my skin, a sharp reminder of what they once symbolized: humiliation, betrayal, the world's laughter ringing in my ears. Now they gleamed beneath the hem of my dress, each step deliberate, each shift of weight calculated to prove that I would not break again. The heels no longer wobbled. They carried me steady, even proud. Madison stood beside me, her veil pinned with pearls, her eyes flashing daggers beneath the mascara. She leaned close, lips hardly moving, and hissed through clenched teeth, "Don't embarrass me again." The venom in her tone cracked against my ear, but the guests saw only her poised smile. I inhaled, steadying the tremor in my chest. The aisle stretched ahead, carpeted in ivory fabric, strewn with petals that glowed faintly in the filtered light. My diary words pulsed inside me. Walk her down the aisle, my choice, not her gift. I took the first step, the stiletto striking the floor with a crisp, unshakable note. Then another, and another. Whispers rippled across the pews. Is she really? After that video? She looks incredible. Admiration flickered, cutting through the shadow of the viral shame. The crowd who once laughed at my fall now leaned forward as if to catch the rhythm of my stride. Evelyn clutched her clutch tighter, leaning toward a neighbor with a forced laugh. "It's still Madison's moment," she said, as though repeating the words would make them true. But her eyes betrayed the twitch of unease, catching the shift in attention, however slight. Halfway down, Madison tried to quicken her pace, pulling against me as though to reassert dominance. But the stilettos, those very weapons of sabotage, held me steady. My steps refused to falter, my body refusing to bend. My silence was louder than any toast, louder than every cruel word she had piled on me. I felt Harper's gaze from the rows of guests, her presence as steadying as a hand at my back. She didn't move, didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her smile was enough, a beacon that told me this rebellion wasn't mine alone. The quartet's melody rose as the altar neared. My pulse pounded, yet not with fear. The humiliation that once seared me had cooled into steel. When I reached the final step, I released Madison's arm with perfect poise, turning just enough for the crowd to see that I hadn't stumbled, hadn't cracked, hadn't yielded. The silence after the last note of my stride stretched thin, the kind of silence that screams louder than applause. And then I looked across the hall. Derek stood at the altar, face blanched, lips parted, as though the breath had been torn from him. His eyes widened when they met mine, as if in that moment the balance of power had shifted. I locked eyes with him, the weight of my steps still echoing in the hush. He looked pale. Love's promises turned to lies beneath stained glass. The cathedral's light streamed through windows painted with saints and martyrs, casting fractured colors across the aisle. Reds and golds flared against marble, purples and blues sliding over silk dresses and polished shoes. The music had ended, the hush had settled. All that remained was the weight of the vows. Derek's hand trembled slightly as he held Madison's fingers. His voice rose, smooth at first, practiced for charm, but faltered when the silence pressed in too hard. I promise to cherish, to honor." His throat tightened. A bead of sweat slid down his temple, catching light like a betraying jewel. Guests leaned forward, smiles expectant, waiting for poetry. What came was halting, hollow. "To stand by you, in whatever may come." Madison forced a radiant smile, her lashes lowered demurely, but her nails dug into his palm. She knew. Somewhere deep in her, she knew. Evelyn dabbed at her eye with a tissue, proud, determined to pretend this was perfection. I stood a few steps behind, the sting of the heels forgotten, my pulse steady as stone. His words cracked like cheap glass in my ears. Lies, every syllable empty, every promise a ghost of something never meant for her. "Funny," I said, my voice cutting across the silence like a blade on silk. Heads swiveled, a ripple breaking the sacred calm. My voice grew firmer, steady, undeniable. Funny, his real vows were to someone else. Gasps erupted. Evelyn froze, tissue suspended in midair. Madison whipped her head toward me, veil trembling with the sudden jolt of fury. Derek's lips parted. The air sucked from his lungs, face blanching as though I had stripped him naked in front of every guest. I lifted my phone, already cued, Thumb pressing play. Screens around the hall lit up in unison, a choreography of revelation. Images spilled into the air, flashing on devices like fireworks. Derek's arm curled around a blonde influencer in dim hotel bars. Sloppy grins pressed cheek to cheek, text scrolling across the glow. Can't wait to see you again, babe. She doesn't matter. You're the only one I want. The silence shattered. Gasps, whispers, cries of disbelief surged like a tide. Guests clutched pearls, leaned in, covered their mouths. Some recorded, already uploading, hungry for the scandal's spark. Madison's scream tore through the cathedral. Raw, jagged, animal. You ruined everything. She lunged at me, bouquet falling to the marble, petals scattering like ashes. Her face, painted flawless, cracked beneath the fury. I stood firm, the phone steady in my hand, proof blazing across every screen. No, Madison, I said softly enough that only she and Derek could hear. He did. The efficient, stammered, frozen, holy book, clutched, uselessly. The quartet sat stunned, bows limp against strings. Then Evelyn broke free of her pew, her heels snapping against the stone, eyes blazing. She stormed toward me, her voice carrying above the uproar. Stop humiliating your sister. Spittle flew with the venom, her finger a spear, aimed at my chest, as though the betrayal of her golden child was my crime to bear. The cathedral was no longer a sanctuary. It was a courtroom, and I had lit the first fire. The bride's veil fell not from grace, but from rage. The lace tore as Madison's trembling hands ripped it free, silk threads catching against jeweled hairpins. It floated for a heartbeat before crumpling to the cathedral floor, no longer a symbol of purity or beauty but a cast-off mask. Her face was raw, distorted with fury. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, thick black lines splitting her powdered perfection into something grotesque. She lunged at me with a shriek so sharp that even the choir balcony flinched. The slap cracked across my cheek, loud as a pistol in the sanctified silence. A wave of gasps swept the pews, then the mechanical rustle of phones rising, screens glowing, cameras hungry. Every angle of her rage was preserved. Every ounce of her downfall streamed live, gleefully devoured. You! Madison screamed, finger stabbing at me as if I were the curse that had haunted her since birth. Her voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, filling the cathedral with madness. Guests pressed back, murmuring, Bridezilla, shameful, she's lost it. Evelyn scrambled toward her daughter, arms spread as though she could wrap her denial around Madison like a shield. She's just overwhelmed. Don't look at her like that. But the guests looked anyway. Phones captured every sob, every shake, every ounce of unraveling. Derek tried to grab Madison's wrist, muttering, Calm down, you're making it worse. His attempt at control only fueled her fire. She wrenched free, shoving him back so violently he stumbled into the altar steps. Gasps multiplied. Somewhere, a phone buzzed audibly his. He glanced down, face blanching. Another buzz. Another. Notifications stacking, clients withdrawing, investments collapsing in real time. His empire crumbled in the palm of his hand. Madison's shrieks turned feral, incoherent, a storm that shredded what little remained of her mask. She clawed at her dress, fabric tearing, pearls scattering across marble like lost teeth. Her sobs were jagged, chest heaving, words spitting out between broken breaths. Clara! Clara! You ruined me! Her knees buckled, satin skirts pooling as she collapsed in front of the altar, the place meant for sacred vows now smeared with her downfall. She pounded the marble with clenched fists, sobbing my name again and again, as though I were both executioner and ghost. I stood frozen, cheek burning from her slap, heart pounding with a strange calm. Around me, whispers turned to judgment, judgment to verdict. The golden girl was gone, and then, against the chaos, a new rhythm emerged, measured, deliberate, the click of heels against stone, slow, precise, commanding. Every head turned. Harper Lee stepped forward from the pews, tall and poised, eyes sharp as steel beneath the chandeliers. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Her heels echoed, steady and unstoppable, falling like a gavel across the cathedral floor. Sometimes justice wears heels, and sometimes it wears gratitude. The cathedral had not yet settled from Madison's collapse when Harper's voice cut clean through the air. Cameras swiveled, necks craned, the hush before her words so total that even Madison's sobbing faltered. Harper stood with the poise of someone who had walked runways from Paris to Milan, but her tone carried none of the superficial gloss. It was reverent, raw, and piercingly real. She taught me how to walk tall, Harper said, every syllable landing like a revelation. Miss Evans is my teacher. For a suspended breath, no one reacted. The crowd blinked, processing the weight of the name. Then gasps rippled down the aisles, spreading like fire through dry grass. The same lips that had mocked my fall now whispered my name in awe. Guests leaned to one another, wide-eyed, murmuring about Harper Lee, the supermodel, the icon paying homage to a woman they had dismissed as background. Phones flew higher, flashes bursting. Madison, crumpled and trembling, shrieked, "She's nothing! She's nothing!" Her voice cracked, brittle as glass. She clawed at the altar rail, as though clinging to the last fragments of her throne. But the more she screamed, the more her image shriveled. The veil was gone, the polish stripped. The Golden Sister's crown had turned to ash. Evelyn stood paralyzed, her painted smile trembling. She whispered under her breath, a fragile sound that seemed meant only for herself. "My God, Clara." Her eyes darted between me and Harper, disbelief warring with the dawning recognition that she had built her devotion on the wrong daughter all along. Harper crossed the marble floor with deliberate grace, heels echoing like declarations of victory. She reached me, eyes gleaming with loyalty and pride that no stage light could outshine. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a public embrace that shattered years of invisibility. The cathedral erupted, applause thundered, so loud it rattled the stained glass and drowned out Madison's broken sobs. Guests surged to their feet, clapping, cheering, even shouting my name. For the first time, their eyes didn't see a shadow, they saw me. The flash of cameras intensified, brighter than any chandelier. Outside, the roar of commotion grew. Paparazzi, hearing the uproar, began to press through the doors. The noise spilled inward, shutters snapping, reporters shouting questions. Vindication was no longer private. It had gone public, and there was no way back. The wedding burned to ashes, but I walked away with glass heels intact. The night air was cool on my skin as I stood on the balcony of the hotel suite, city lights scattering across the skyline like 1,000 tiny witnesses. The chaos of the cathedral still echoed faintly in my chest, though here, high above the noise, it felt distant like a storm finally blown out to sea. My phone buzzed again on the table behind me. Evelyn's voice had filled voicemail after voicemail with frantic pleas. "Clara, answer me. Clara, she needs us. Clara, don't do this." But I let it ring, over and over, until the sound faded into silence. For once, I owed her nothing. The world moved fast when blood met scandal. News outlets had already posted their headlines. Bridezilla meltdown goes viral. Scandal at the Evans wedding. Derek Holloway exposed. Derek's clients pulled out one after another. His empire crumbled in hours. Madison, the girl who once thrived on attention, now drowned in it but for all the wrong reasons. Screens replayed her mascara-smeared collapse, her slap, her screams. And this time, nobody applauded. Harper leaned against the balcony rail, her silhouette outlined by the glow of the city. She raised a glass of champagne, the bubbles catching light like sparks. "You taught me to rise," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine with gratitude and something fiercer, like faith. "Now it's your turn." The words settled into me like an oath. For years I had written my sacrifices in ink, hidden in pages of a diary no one would ever read. Tonight, I no longer needed to write them. I was living them. I lifted my glass to hers, the crystal clinking sharp and clean. The sound rang like a bell, not for endings, but beginnings. Inside the suite, the stilettos sat on the dresser, scuffed from humiliation yet unbroken. I picked them up slowly, their weight more symbolic than leather and steel. With deliberate hands, I placed them inside a glass display case I had found earlier, locking them away not as relics of shame, but as trophies of survival. "They broke me with these," I whispered, fingers resting on the lid. "I rebuilt myself on them." For a long moment, I watched the heels gleam beneath the glass. Then I turned away. The carpet was soft beneath my bare feet as I walked back to the balcony, champagne in hand, the city stretching out in endless promise. Tomorrow would come Sunday morning, quiet, ordinary. I would pack, leave, and start again. But tonight, with the heels behind me and the skyline before me, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. I stepped forward, barefoot, into the cool night, leaving the heels behind a silent promise that the future would be mine alone. Beneath the glittering ruin of a wedding meant to crown Madison, justice emerged instead, exposing deceit, crumbling facades, and reclaiming a voice once silenced. Clara's quiet endurance transformed into a storm of truth, reminding all that betrayal thrives only when left unchallenged. When injustice is met with unflinching courage, the final verdict echoes far beyond the moment itself, reshaping lives and legacies. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below. Comment 1 if you felt her triumph, or 2 if you're still left wanting more.